I've been graced with living a life full of adventure through video games. One thing I've found over the years is that the best adventures are the ones you don't actually know you're on. I understand that there's a lot of hype surrounding the release of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, but I don't think gamers truly understand what they're getting here. A developer needs to understand inspiration, but also how to tie that back into their own means of storytelling, culture, and gameplay systems. Clair Obscur, from beginning to end, is unapologetically French. This game is both familiar and yet completely unique thanks to its narrative pacing and combat systems. While I do have a lot to say in this review, if you are at all hesitant about Clair Obscur Expedition 33, don't be. It's one of the greatest adventures that I've been on in recent years, comparable to any mainline Final Fantasy release. But like any Final Fantasy, some elements may divide the player base.
Wait! It seems peaceful, as long as we don't touch the flowers.
Yeah, let's not get too sentimental. It's still a painter's creation.
Like any good piece of French literature, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a tragedy. You begin the game in the city of Lumière, where you meet Gustave and his adopted sister Maëlle. The number 34 is written on a mountain in the distance, which currently holds the focus of the entire city that is covered in rose petals. The truth of this number comes to light relatively quickly as it fades to reveal a 33, and with it, any person of that age disappears. This is just the reality of the citizens of Lumière. A curse threatens their existence as a distant enemy known as the Paintress kills an entire age group each year. That said, Gustave, Maëlle, and others have put their time into training as expeditioners, fated to sail over to the Paintress's island each year in hopes of taking her down. Many years and many expeditions have failed before, but Gustave, a man with very little left to fight for in Lumière, is hoping to spend his final days attempting to end the curse. Others have come before him, and others plan to go after. But hope quickly fades as they arrive on the island, met by a mysterious man who attacks the entire expedition unprovoked. It's here Gustave sits at a crossroads, willing to end it all for just a moment of relief from the nightmare that he's found himself in. But luckily for him, his friend Luné also survived the attack, and along with Maëlle and another expeditioner named Ciel, they plan to complete their mission and take down the Paintress. As a lead, Gustave is rather unique. He's definitely got some demons, but he relies heavily on Maëlle and the others around him to point him in the right direction. Given this is an RPG, I don't want to spoil anything about your experience with these characters. What I can say is that I was initially worried about some of the late game characters who join, such as Ciel or Monaco. I just didn't really understand their inclusion when they first joined the group, other than being a new party member for combat. However, that changes as campsites become more important in the later hours, and bonding events unlock conversations between Gustave and the others that highlight their backstories. I should mention though that this bonding system in particular is pretty bare bones and almost unnecessary due to the events not really being restricted by anything other than progress in the game. This does waste time during moments when you arrive at camp and have to talk to each person and see if they have a bonding event available. For this system to feel natural in the game flow, I think it should be restricted to one bonding event per night, or show an indicator above a character's head to let you know that they have an event available. The restricted suggestion wouldn't actually work in the current version of the game because camping can be done at any time. I'm just throwing that out as general feedback. There are also two characters, Verso and Renor, who shock the group by just being old, which is a pretty rare sight for them. Renor isn't really a nice man, but his resolve ultimately makes me pity him. He carries a burden that he created on his shoulders and seems to blame everyone else for it. Verso and Gustave share a few similarities. One is that they're both absolute husbandos on the battlefield, but they're also both very different characters. In that same breath, I think it would have served the narrative better to show Gustave interacting more with the late game characters, which brings me to say that there are a few elements of this adventure that will completely divide the player base when it comes to pacing and key events. That can likely be said for any RPG, but this game has some Final Fantasy VII Remake levels of mind games. I personally loved what they did, but again, I think there should have been more screen time with Gustave and probably Verso, where their first interactions could have really set up a nice buildup of drama. Regardless, the twists and realizations made on this expedition will be discussed within gaming circles for years to come. Honestly, I feel like only a French teen could have pulled this off. It's both romantic and nightmarish in every moment. There's so much beauty in this destruction, and the camera will linger on uncomfortable moments long enough for you to process the situation, live with it, and then find a path forward. I was brought to tears on numerous occasions. Within a few hours, it's tough not to feel like a member of this expedition, and I'd like to think that that's all by design. The narrative isn't afraid to reveal its hand before the climax because it knows you're not prepared for what it's about to throw at you. I would love to talk for hours about these characters and their interactions, but I'll leave it for now and cap it off with, I just really love these characters. So let's get into the combat. When first arrived on the island, you'll go through some tutorials, but this act of encountering new enemy types and essentially learning how they fight is a constant thing throughout the game. The basics are that when it's your turn, you have a few attack options. You can exhaust AP with aim, which can sometimes be used to shoot an enemy weak point. You can also use an item, which are limited and only replenished at rest spots. There are also skills which consume AP, and attack which doesn't consume AP, and depending on your equipped weapon, you may have some elemental advantage with your attacks. When it comes to skill attacks, players will be met with a quick time event that can be turned off in the settings. I also played through the game in Expedition mode, which is the default setting, but we'll dive into that later. Now, enemy attacks are what will take the most understanding. The only way you're going to get through this game is by being an enemy attack reading expert. The primary system here is the ability to dodge or parry most attacks. These essentially do the same thing, but parries have a smaller window and allow for a follow-up attack if successful. Later on, you'll gain access to a jump action to avoid specific attacks, and even a new type of dodge that avoids powerful enemy attacks in the late game. This evolution in combat definitely keeps things interesting in the second half of the expedition because you also unlock a new special attack, which can also act as a second action in combat. These special attacks, which I don't want to spoil, are unique to each character and can be learned through progressing the bonding events. The combat is entirely skill-based. You will die a lot, even to the grunt enemy encounters, but there's a nice autosave system that gets you back in the action. While you can actually flee from battles, it does take an entire turn. There's no option to just press start and leave the fight, which I really liked. You're essentially forced to get good or die trying. I assure you now that if you don't believe in your skills to block these attacks, you won't get very far. I will say though that the story mode difficulty, which can be changed to at any time, alleviates this by lowering the stats of enemies dramatically, giving you ample time to learn enemy attack patterns which consistently change as new enemy types are introduced. I tried a few battles with story mode difficulty and I wasn't having fun personally. Even though I won fights quickly and didn't have to block or dodge anything, I didn't feel rewarded. I'm actually glad about this because it means that players of any skill type could easily see the credits of this game, and that's what's most important. That said, I played the game for 10 hours one day and was still invested in the combat. I can't begin to tell you about all the games that I end up cheesing through in the late hours just because the grunt fights grow stale. Perhaps it's the required player attention and battles that alleviate combat exhaustion because I can't remember a moment when I wasn't having fun in this game. That said, combat strategy can shift rapidly. You may have go-to combos where I personally relied on Gustav's charge and CL's dark attacks, but small mistakes in a setup or taking damage will force you to create an alternative approach. If your main party falls, you do have an option to bring in the other members of your team as backup, which I thought was really cool. Stats from levels end up playing a much larger role in the late game as they directly correlate with your equipped weapon. It actually doesn't matter where you put your stats at the beginning of the game because you get these items later on that allow you to reset your character stats. When it comes to upgrading your raw stats, you're free to put all your points in attack and HP all you want, but in the later parts of the game, you'll notice your team attacks less and less often. Further, it doesn't really matter how powerful you are because for most of the game, you're locked at 9,999 damage per attack, so be sure to give some love to agility and luck. You'll have an easier time and thank me later. The equipped weapon also provides some stat increases, so if you have a level 20 weapon that you really like, you can reset the stats of the character with the added benefits of the equipped weapon in mind, using the reset item. It's a cool system that doesn't really reveal itself until much later. Skills can also be learned, but they come at a slower pace. Each character has unique strategic depth, such as Mael relying on stances for extra damage or defense, RCL who can throw cards and depending on the suit of the card, can stack huge amounts of damage if played right. It's a really fun system that mirrors deck builders in terms of using turns to set up later strategies and hoping no one foils your plans. There's also added buffs called Pictos which can be learned permanently and equipped depending on the Luminous you have access to. This system is actually pretty confusing. I didn't know until 20 hours in what luminous even were, but basically you can equip 3 Pictos to a character, which adds some stat benefits. While it's equipped, it'll level up and be learnable by the entire cast. You'll need enough luminous to equip it permanently, but by the time I figured that out, I had a nice pool of available luminous to equip about 9 or 10 of these extra abilities. This brings me to the most lacking part of this entire experience, the menuing. If there was one negative aspect about this game, it's the lack of a cohesive menu and quality of life extras that many players will eventually expect. Currently, every menu outside of the battles looks like a bunch of random clickable boxes on a black screen. Navigating from equipment to Pictos to Lumina is confusing and unintuitive. It's really the only damper on the game outside of how you can't place map markers on the world map to help you get around. Trust me, once you unlock SK's flying ability, you're gonna want it. There are also a lot of secret areas you'll want to explore in the end game, but remembering where everything is isn't easy. Regardless, exploration will have you forgetting about those menus in no time because this team knows how to design dungeons. Every area I visited left some impact on me, as the team understands that there has to be at least 2 landmarks in each place players visit. They all stand out in my memory so vividly, but I'd say my favorite dungeon is the one that houses the dancing enemy boss. It's designed as an arena, and when you get to that stage, you'll know why I love it so much. Interestingly, anytime you get off the beaten path, you'll be rewarded, or punished, given that many routes lead to secret bosses in the dungeons, but if you beat them, you'll get some pretty cool items. Some areas in the world map are simply one screen with a static camera and an item to pick up. These areas are interesting given that they could have been their own dungeon, but instead, they now act as a moment of silence for the player to rest while taking in the atmosphere of whatever scene it is. I would have liked it if the developers allowed players to trigger a special event between the cast in these areas, much like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 where you can trigger bonding events. You can also find secret mini-games around the map that unlock bathing suits for the cast. Optional clothing is cool in this game, and the threads do appear in cutscenes, but this can be turned off in the options. Anyway, goddamn, all these characters, even you Monaco, are double cheeked up. Before I digress, most costumes besides bathing suits can be unlocked through optional quests and purchasable hairstyles, but I will say though, that Mael gets the best optional costumes of the group. Sound design is also an important factor given that enemy telegraphs have visual and audio cues of when to dodge. The music is dynamic in battles as it raises and falls with the pace of the fight. I'm thinking about the last boss score right now, and it's tough not to want to hear it again. There are some pretty good soundtracks, and I've been trying to listen to the score while I do chores around the house. This quality is also seen in the voice cast. Jennifer English absolutely steals the show here, as her performance of Mael is one that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. She really puts in the effort to sell and depict the struggles and confusion that this character goes through. It's an on-screen roller coaster of emotion that I doubt many can convey so effortlessly, and still have room for the subtle humor across some of these scenes. She's soft yet stern in her convictions, which does kind of rival Verso's character played by who can be nonchalant about certain events, as he is a person who'd rather live with the current timeline than deal with the effort and emotional anguish of doing what is right. These two characters need each other, and it plays so well on screen. Gustav, voiced by Charlie Cox, was also a good choice given that this character deals with the responsibility of keeping everyone safe, but also has this soft side about him that comes out when he needs to be an anchor for Mael. Wonderful casting, all around, gold stars. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a genuine standout RPG driven by courage, sacrifice, and the powerful bonds formed in the midst of tragedy. It pushes you to confront loss and hope in equal measure, resonating long after the credits roll. It's a beautifully tragic expedition that demands your emotional investment, repaying it with the story and characters that will reward the time it takes to develop the skills of not taking any damage in combat. But to close out, this may be a divisive game within the community due to its skill-based combat system and a few questionable choices with the direction of the story. But all I can tell you is that this is one tragedy you're gonna want to see through. Noisy Pixel is giving Clair Obscur Expedition 33 a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.